finished Matt Dinniman's Operation Bounce House. This is the same author as Dungeon Crawler Carl. Dungeon Crawler Carl, as I'm sure plenty of you know, is an extremely popular book series out right now. There's 8 books published, and I believe there's a goal of having 10 books in the series total. I actually own all those books. They're up there in the corner. But I'm not a big fan of starting series that are incomplete just personally. I've accidentally started multiple series that are incomplete. And as somebody who really needs to reread before I can read the next book in a series that comes out, starting series that aren't complete yet leads to a ton of rereading that I just don't always have time for, and I would prefer to be reading new books. But when I found out that Matt Dinniman had published Operation Bounce House, which is a standalone book, I got really excited because it gives me an opportunity to be exposed to this author before reading Dungeon Crawler Carl. Furthermore, Operation Bounce House has the lowest rating for Matt Dinniman's books on Goodreads, which I think is so interesting and reminded me of another book I've read, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This book is one of the secret projects that Brandon Sanderson released, and it's also the least favored out of those secret projects. And a big reason why is because it's not part of the Cosmere, which is Brandon Sanderson's big major universe. A lot of the judgment that I saw for this book online was because it wasn't Cosmere, which isn't really fair, in my opinion, to the book itself. And actually, this ended up being the very first Brandon Sanderson book I read on purpose because I wanted to be more fair to this book and not judge it in comparison to the Cosmere. So before I even started the Cosmere, I started here. And I ended up loving this book, and I'm really glad I did that. So when I found out that Operation Bounce House was also rated the lowest for this author on Goodreads, I thought, yep, that's the first book that I need to read. Especially when I went and looked online on the Goodreads comments and the posts that were made about Operation Bounce House, and a lot of the negative commentary that is for this book that rates it lower are all saying the same thing. It doesn't hold up to Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's not as good. And I was like, that's why I need to read this before I read Dungeon Crawler Carl, so I can be a lot more fair with this book and allow it to be the standalone that it is. So let's get into a spoiler-free review for Operation Bounce House. I will be doing spoilers at the end of this video though, and I will have a very clear spoilers warning before I go into any of those. But for the most part, this video is going to be spoiler-free. This book is split up into 5 sections, 5 days. And I will say, for star ranking, overall, I would give it a 4.5 stars. But the very first day, day 1, when I got to the end of it, I was like, okay, this is a solid 3.8 star read. I was enjoying the story, I was enjoying the narrative, but to be completely honest, it felt like there were a couple extra paragraphs that didn't need to be there. A lot of actually world building, kind of, way more than I would expect for what ultimately is a thriller, sci-fi story. Having so many details about backgrounds of the characters and past for the city and the towns that they're in and the kind of culture established part, I just didn't really understand why exactly we were going so far into that. But as I progressed through the book, I kind of realized that I think those paragraphs weren't actually meant for me, the reader. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but honestly, those paragraphs were more productive for a set designer, because I definitely think that this book should be made into a movie. This book would be such a good movie. And once I realized that, kind of starting on day 2 of reading Operation Bounce House, I was like, oh, this would make an excellent movie. It's a really good book, and it will make an excellent movie if it's done right. And a lot of those extra paragraphs in that first day that kind of felt like it was slowing down the thriller nature of this book, I was like, oh, it's just the author telling the set designers how they want them to design the set for the movie for this book. I'm sure that's not actually the intention of those paragraphs, but that's kind of how they felt, and I let them be that way. Once day 2 started, and 3 and 4, and then the finale with day 5, it just got better and better and better, and I just liked it more and more and more. I absolutely loved the conclusion for this story. I thought it was done super well. This makes me so unbelievably excited to read Dungeon Crawler Carl if it's so much better than Operation Bounce House, and I really did like this book. I loved the characters. They're actually, as the story progresses, the humor continues to progress. It gets funnier and funnier, even though it also simultaneously somehow gets sadder and sadder. A lot of the solutions that I was thinking up, the author takes in a different direction, and I liked that because it wasn't entirely predictable. And yet even the one part where I did predict that the characters would need to have, even then, the outcome of that situation wasn't what I initially predicted. So it remained surprising, and I really enjoyed that. I loved that from the very beginning, I had no idea what was going to happen in the long run, who was going to survive, how they were going to survive, if any of them were going to survive. It was really, really intriguing. I also feel like it brought up a couple interesting, like, philosophical questions about being human and about AI, which was really interesting and even kind of poignant for today's conversations about AI. So overall, like I said, 4.5 stars, absolutely fabulous. There isn't really spiciness in this book, but these are all adult characters, and some of the insults that are used and references that are used are a little bit more adult related for adult related behaviors. So I still think teens could read this and be fine personally. I don't think it would be a problem, but probably like, I don't know, 15 and up, 16 and up, I guess, for this book. I don't know. There's no explicit sex scenes in this book. And that makes perfect sense because that's not the point of this book. So overall, really enjoyed this, really liked this. So glad I read this before reading Dungeon Crawler Carl. If you already read Dungeon Crawler Carl and you're thinking about picking up Operation Bounce House, I would say wait a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I think you should read this. But if you've just read the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, if you jump into this, you're going to judge it way too harshly, and it will be unfair to this book. Give yourself some time, go read other things, then come back to this, and I think you'll enjoy it. Good times. Happy read. Okay, for spoilers. If you would like to skip spoilers, you can do so now. I'm going to be talking specifically about the AI component of this book. I think what's really fascinating from the very beginning is how I felt about Roger, and the fact that I both love Roger. Roger is basically the only reason why these individuals survived, and that's awesome. But also acknowledging like how kind of terrifying Roger was. Understanding Lulu when she was like, go kill all the humans on Earth. I get that because they, committed mass genocide on her planet. So fair enough. But I also appreciate that Oliver was like, that doesn't feel good either. And what was really interesting for me was the experience of like, the utter rage and disgust at humanity from Earth and the, despicableness of the behaviors they were engaging in and what was allowed and approved. And feeling like, the inner rage of like, yeah, just end them all, but not via AI. Interestingly enough, like, even though I'm not actually in support of that being the solution because humanity is complex and of course there are other people on planet Earth who don't agree with Operation Bounce House, I definitely felt like it wasn't appropriate for AI to be the source of humanity's destruction, even if humanity is awful. It's people who have the right, in a way, I guess, to take their revenge. But having an AI do it was just like, no. And then it was weird. It was interesting because, of course, I'm in support of the people on this planet, on New Sororan, but Roger just slowly became more and more scary, even though he was on our side as like the main character's side. So it was a really interesting experience to both simultaneously love Roger and slowly become more and more fearful of him. And it was really interesting when Eli Opal dies crying over the fact that he realized that this AI is now on Earth and kind of realizing the possibility of this AI destroying his world. And that in their decision to come to New Sororan and do this game and all the other BS about the decisions that Eli Opal made and everybody else at Apex Industries. I just think it was really kind of interesting to be like, ooh, like the weird core of like the humanity of like not actually wanting your species to die out, even though you engage in genocide of members of your species. Just became really, I don't know, philosophically intriguing, and I really liked it. And the ending I thought was really interesting as well, like the very, very, very end, last page end, with what Roger shares. And this idea of like what AI, sentient AI, would be thinking or feeling, the messiness of all of that with regards to AI right now and how we're using AI and misusing AI and the slowly growing dependency on AI, as well as the disgust with AI and the, pushback against, for example, Barnes & Noble having said that they would be roughly okay with selling AI books in their bookstore as long as they are honest about the fact that they're written by AI. I just think it's kind of just like, it's interesting to have Roger. I have so many mixed feelings and honestly very negatively leaning feelings about AI. I just don't think it's used in the way it could be used productively in our world right now. And so to have Roger, who is both the savior in a way, a savior in this story, but also is so dangerous and terrifying and scary, and me being simultaneously like, oh, I love Roger. Oh, if we could all have a Roger, and being like, we absolutely none of us ever, 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 ever should create a Roger, is such an interesting experience as a reader. So I thought that's really just to like kind of hint on the fact that I thought it was quite thought-provoking. I liked the romance. There wasn't a ton in this book, of course, but I liked Oliver and Rosita. I liked the exploration of Roger being a bit more timid and a bit slower on the upkeep of what, pursuing of what he wants, and how he gets there in the end. I loved the farmers. I thought that they were such a beautiful group of people and just really exemplified the lovely aspects of humanity, even if it's not about, just demonstrating the innocenceness of humanity. It's more than that. And I liked that. So anyways, overall, loved Operation Bounce House. Next up on the docket is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I am going back into the Cosmere. I'm very excited for this. So far in the Cosmere, I have read Mistborn Era 1 along with the 11th Metal short story and Secret History short story, which I decided to read earlier on because I have so many books in between reading Era 1 and Era 2 of Mistborn. The next up is going to be Elantris. I'm very excited. I believe this was Brandon Sanderson's first published book. And it is the first book published within the Cosmere universe. So I'm very excited for this, although I am a-okay with being calmer and patient about this book. I know that the writing is supposedly a little rougher, and so I am prepared for that. I do have the 10-year anniversary, which has the extra 10,000 words of bonus content, so I'm very happy that I got this edition. That's all I have for Operation Bounce House, so if you do end up reading it, I hope you like it. Keep reading what you love, and I will see you next time.